Musa Kalenga.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to the platform. Welcome to Winners Win.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Just before you and I were chatting, I get the sense that you're a techno optimist of sorts.
Yes.
Where did the love of technology come from, and how was it cultivated in you?
A great question. So techno optimist, yes, I think I absolutely am. If I'm to think about where the love of technology came from, I think it was probably developed over time. I can't think that there was a particular moment aside from my first experience with a beeper. I don't know whether you ever used a beeper before.
I have not.
A beeper is still used by doctors today, actually.
Right.
It's like a small pager, basically. So if you think about a device that looks almost like an iPad case,
right.
iPhone case, that just sends you like a little message. It's a ticker tape that you get.
Yes.
So doctors use it when they have to be on call.
Okay.
And I remember I got my first beeper, and I was quite taken aback by the fact that people could contact me in real time.
Okay.
And my dad was also into technology, so he explained to me how this beeper thing worked.
What was the mechanism on a beeper?
You literally would send a message. Okay. It was like a text message, literally, but it would come up on a ticker tape on the device.
From what device would you send that text message?
From another device, from another beeper.
From another beeper.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was the first time I saw like how this thing can be instantaneous and people can contact me in an age where we were writing letters and things like that. So that was the starting point of kind of an interest. But certainly as I've learned more about technology and as I studied a little bit more about technology, it's grown over time, because in the beginning you're obsessed with the new shiny thing.
Yes.
Right? It's a beeper, then it becomes a Tamagotchi, then it becomes a
floppy
cell
disk.
phone, then it becomes so
right.
You're obsessed with a new fancy thing. But for me, I suppose the turning point is when you realize that fancy thing can actually change your life.
Right.
Fancy thing can actually solve a very big problem. And I think that's probably for me when the penny dropped around what it can do for our continent.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Did you go into programming, or was it just sort of an interest point? And how far did you go? Were you breaking apart the beeper, checking what's in it, etc.?
I actually had no interest in the hardware, to be honest.
Okay.
The funny thing is I had no interest in taking stuff apart. I just had fascination in what it could do. So I was programming in high school. So I was coding, and that for me was the part where I got the inside look around how it all comes together when you have to build like Pac-Man games and funny things like that. So I got an understanding of the assembly. Yeah. But when I left Facebook, I thought about going to study coding like full time.
Right.
And it was at a point in my life where I wanted to start doing much more to accelerate what I saw as ideas in my head. And so there's always a gap. You're either the guy that comes up with the ideas, or you're the guy that builds it.
Right.
And in the very fortunate case of some really great technologists, you can do both.
Right.
The triple threat, as they call them. And so when I left Facebook, I kind of had been exposed to 2 or 3 very unique individuals that could think about business.
Right.
They could code and build stuff, and they understood how to commercialize it.
Yes.
Right? Which for me is that's the
magic
unicorn
formula. Yeah.
So I said to myself at that point, I get business. I understand how consumers work, but I can't code.
Okay.
In that context, I couldn't code. I'd coded many years back. So I wanted to go and study it again, and it was just coincidentally I bumped into one of my business partners who codes, and his name is Koka. You know him?
Yes.
And that for me was just, I suppose, serendipity, because the universe responded and gave me what I didn't have.
Yes.
And we've been partners since.
That's and programming is such a high concentration, time-consuming process.
Yes.
If you have the business skills, it's always better to find the guy who's willing to sit in the dark room and code.
Yes.
What came first? Was it Facebook or the bank?
It was the bank.
It was the bank first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I spent some years in a bank, and it was more of a social experiment. If I'm to be honest with myself, it was more of a social experiment. Being young entrepreneurs who start businesses early, there's always a degree of imposter syndrome.
Right.
There's always the degree of, sure, you've started a business, but do you know how big business really works? You know what I'm saying? So in my mind, I was kind of like, well, it'd be interesting to know how big business really works, because obviously they create frustration for us entrepreneurs, and sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So getting into a context where I was very fortunate to start in a fairly senior executive position in a bank, and I was in my mid-20s. I was given quite a lot of freedom to bring what I believe to be my magic into an organization that was struggling with innovation, that was, like many other banks at the time, trying to figure out social media.
Right.
But for me, it was certainly about understanding what happens that creates so much frustration for entrepreneurs. How do the wheels turn in this environment? And it was important for me to have done that, actually, because the level of appreciation and insight now that I have around how long it takes to make decisions, as an example.
Yes.
The bottlenecks that someone will typically experience, even though you've got a very senior title in a big organization. Because as entrepreneurs, we get frustrated with stuff like that. We just don't understand why it takes that long. So it was a great experiment for me. And fortunately got to build and do some interesting things.
Beautiful.
Spend other people's money, which was nice for a change. Build a team, and work in an environment where people were drastically different from me. Right. When you start a business and you're running a business, you will tend to attract people who are similar and oscillate in your kind of headspace or physical spaces. And so it was nice to work with people who were in multiple teams, different skill sets, different understandings of this thing that we're trying to do. And so that was also very, very challenging and quite interesting.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then you find yourself in the agency world. So you go. And as a technologist coming into an agency sort of creative world, what's that process been like?
So it's my second stint in the agency world.
Okay.
So my first business, Monate Fellas, was essentially an agency.
Right.
We focused on research and the insight that helped corporates understand young South Africans. But it, from a service perspective, also eventually ended up doing what agencies do. Big focus on young people, big focus on brands trying to be relevant with young people. We did some, for the time, really interesting things like rebranding knickknacks, launching condom brands into the country. So we did some cool things.
Okay.
And even
so we blame you for the high rate.
The opposite, my brother. You should thank me. It could be
high rate. No, I was going to say the high rate of sexual activity. It's good.
That one you can blame me for.
Right.
And so even with Monate Fellas, as a young student trying to create value, trying to figure things out, it was very much the agency model. It was very much find clients that are willing to pay, for your time and for, the brilliant things that come out of your head.
Yeah.
And then charge them for it and try and make margin in the process.
For sure.
So it was very similar to what I even experienced when I came back.
Yeah.
The power dynamic was always skew. I never fully liked the understanding that was baked into how agencies operate. Right. It's one of the only service businesses where the professional is not given the respect that they should be given.
Right.
You go to a lawyer, you'll listen to what he has to say. You go to a doctor or a specialist, you listen to what they have to say.
Absolutely.
You come to a marketer or a brand person, you're smarter than them. Your opinion matters more than them. Which for me was always very bizarre. So that value equation never made sense.
That's interesting.
So coming back into it, the fundamentals haven't changed. And so what I've come to do now is set myself on a mission to try and at least change that. Try and at least balance the equation around value. Try and at least figure out what the next iteration of this looks like.
Yeah. How big is the business now?
Brave Group.
Yeah.
So Brave Group, fortunately, has been operating for almost 15 years.
Yeah.
We've got about 60 people in the business now. We service, fortunately, a wide array of clients, so we're not industry specific, and we're growing. We've been very fortunate that through the COVID era, where a lot of people experienced challenges, we had a great set of clients that that kept us quite stable, and the organization kind of maintained. And so it's a fantastic little business. It's just, I think, from a challenge point of view, there's some core things we're trying to fix.
Right.
We've got ultimately 4 capabilities. Right. 3 of them are what I would call more traditional capabilities. Right. House of Brave being the original business, the founding business, which was your traditional above the line agency, a la Ogilvy, etc. We then subsequently started 2 other businesses. One is a PR practice called Bold, narrative, crisis comms, corporate comms. Yeah. And then we've got another business called Bravado, which is effectively an experiential agency, doing a lot of kind of on the ground activations, promotions, and integrated digital stuff. Right. And then the latest business, which is Forge, Forge by Brave, which I launched last year at IMC, which is our real kind of moonshot at trying to figure out what the next iteration of creativity and technology means. Okay. And so Forge itself is a creative services business. When you say creative services, there's a component of the business that's a software as a service technology, and there's a component of the business that is a service team that is getting trained up on understanding how AI works, how you use it in a creative process, and how to optimize that for our clients' needs. So those are the 4 key capabilities in our business.
I saw you. I don't know if you. I'll say it. I think you invented the phrase artificial general marketing intelligence. Yeah. What is that in as far as one? So the arc of how, or the evolution of how the evolution of marketing. Yeah. From traditional to new media, et cetera, and now the advent of AI. How are you seeing that roadmap?
Look, I think so. With every new technical or technological innovation, there are very clear phases that you have to be aware of. I was very fortunate when the social media era became a thing. I was going into Nedbank. Right. I was coming out of an agency which was trying to understand what social media meant, called IHOP, and I went straight into a corporate that was grappling with exactly the same things. I feel like it's that all over again, right? So what were the questions that were being asked back then? Number one, the question was being asked around, what do we do with social media? And is it a corporate tool or is it just a tool for kids to play with? Right. Questions were being asked about, how does this thing actually lead to business results? Right. Questions were being asked about, how do we govern this? I remember writing the policy for social media when I was at Nedbank that pretty much said you're not allowed to access social media during 9 to 5.
During 9 to 5,
like really, you know what I mean? So we were responding to the technology of the day, and the response is generally risk averse. It's exactly the same thing that's happening now. Okay. People are responding to the technology of the day being AI, and I fully expect that the response initially is risk averse. Yes. So what I've tried to do with all the things that I've learned as I've interacted with different technologies is I've tried to create a framework that helps people ease into the risk and get comfortable with the risk. Okay. Like all new things, there's a period of exploration, right? There's a period where you just have to kind of, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm just going to give it a bash. And so the framework, artificial general marketing intelligence, is designed to help marketers have a soft landing. Okay. Now, it's the combination of a few things. We've started experimenting 24 months ago with best-in-class AI across the marketing value chain. Okay. And so a lot of our learnings in terms of what we've realized, what we've stumbled upon, what we've created is what I'm taking and incorporating into artificial general marketing intelligence. Okay. It's basically giving people the understanding that you can work very well alongside a lot of these platforms if you understand how they work. Right. The term very broadly artificial intelligence is also a little bit misleading because you'll have lead products like ChatGPT that become almost category standards. Right. So when people talk about artificial general marketing intelligence and you speak about what they're doing with AI, they'll say ChatGPT, right? Which is misleading because ChatGPT is one of many AI tools. Okay. And it's a early symptom of people not actually fully knowing what AI can do. And so when you start talking to them about a framework that they can locate themselves in, when you start showing them how the tools are not the same, ChatGPT is not the same as Perplexity, which is not the same as Gemini, which is not the same as DeepSeek. And why are they different? And then understanding how you use them to be able to create better outputs is really what we have to give people comfort about. And so I took all those learnings and I took the process I've gone through to get myself comfortable with AI. And I've tried to ensure that because it's the truth. The human is still the center of it all, right? I was listening to a doctor the other day. I did a talk down in Durban, and they were technology pessimists, right? And they got up on stage, and after I did my talk, you could tell they were trying to take a little bit of a jab. They were like, "Yeah, last week I used ChatGPT, and it kept on repeating the same things." And I just listened to that, and I thought, that's such a immature statement to make,
right?
For two reasons. One, the phrase, a bad workman always blames their tools.
The tools,
right?
Correct.
So all of us can sit here with a toolbox full of stuff, but not everyone can build this shelf.
Correct.
Right? So for you to sit there and go, I use ChatGPT and it gave me the same answers, then you're actually the problem.
Right.
Number two, if you ask the person what model of ChatGPT do you use, he probably wouldn't know, right?
He was using the free version.
He's using the free version. You know what I mean? So irresponsible statements like that are so typical of people who haven't gone through the journey.
Okay.
So artificial general marketing intelligence is just an attempt to help people understand that it's from a marketing context, which by the way is the industry that was highlighted as the first to be completely disrupted. By AI.
Absolutely.
And it's true.
Yeah.
But I think of it as a reinvention. I think of it as an opportunity and an invitation to reinvent.
I heard you say you defined it as the risk, right? And then providing a soft landing.
Yeah.
So below the framework, practically, what's in the framework? So, how do you integrate this framework into an organization? So do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. So as an example, there's many parts to unpacking it, but I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. So in the marketing context, there are pretty much 4 stages of working through a creative assignment, right? There's a part where you get a brief. A brief is client says to you, hey, Ted, I want to launch brand X, right? You have to be able to clarify that brief, understand what they're talking about, and make sure you get what it's all about. Stage 1. Once you have that clarity and your client actually approves that brief, you typically go into a process of exploration or strategy, right? So the double diamond of any design thinking process is you go wide, and that, we call different things, but, we call it strategy. You're going down the rabbit hole, you're trying to figure out lots of things, doing your research, pulling it together, and then you bring it to a head, right? You come up with a conclusion, a strategic platform, whatever it is. Once that is approved / signed off, you then move into the actual creative process, right? Which is the big ideas, the deep thinking, the creatives going to find an inspiring place to think about stuff and come up with the weird, crazy things they do. And typically that also goes through a process where you need to get that approved. And then it's the making, right? Then you're creating something. You're creating an output, a social media post, a thing, a TV ad, a commercial. So across those 4 steps, there's been 0 to no innovation in the last 100 years.
This is true.
We all follow the same steps. We call them different things, but it's the same steps. And so we looked at each one of those, and we looked at what's the best in class AI for each of those steps. And we've developed methodologies around getting the best value from that.
Okay, so, but with that said, I always get the sense that we are telling people that they remain at the center of, the ecosystem. Even though we're seeing sort of jobs being wiped away. What you've just defined, to me, feels like you've now removed your strategist.
No,
okay.
I haven't. So did
maybe not all of them.
No, maybe no.
If it was a department of 7, now there's 2.
Potentially, yes.
Right. Okay.
Did social media take away the post office? No, it didn't. Right.
But when was the last time you went to the post office?
I still get posts. I still get posts.
Okay,
There's still
respect.
registered mail. There's still things that happen.
That's the beeper blood in you.
Yeah, it's still. You still get deliveries from Take a Lot.
Respect.
Right. So there's certain fundamentals that won't change, but to your point, there's a hell of a lot of optimization from an efficiency perspective that we'll get. For me, I think the opportunity is for people who are worried about AI, especially in marketing and advertising, replacing them. They've got a lot to be worried about. But the exercise is not to sit and obsess about what's going to happen when AI takes over my job.
Right.
The exercise is to use yourself as a human to reinvent what you do. Right. So when I sit with the teams and even our client service teams, who a lot of what they'll do will be automated. Right. And reports, creating instructions, those kind of things can be automated. So I keep on saying to them, use the opportunity to reinvent yourself. Go and spend more time with your client.
Right.
Go and, I believe, we should embrace having now the opportunity to actually give, theatrical pitches to clients because you got time. Correct. Create moments that are memorable for a client. There's no excuse now that you don't have the time. So, so the way I position it in with artificial general marketing intelligence is that, the one thing that people always complain about is not having enough time. The creative process, we don't have enough time to do the things. We don't have enough time. So I'm going, well, here's a way that we can create that time. And what are you going to fill it with? So even for a strategist who's sitting there going, now this thing can handle a lot of the heavy lifting, the mental load. I always tell them, my favorite term is they're still the magic dust. They're still they're still getting into a room and selling this thing. Okay. Right? They're still that. So two people can use ChatGPT, the most advanced reasoning model, and come up with something wonderful on paper. But one of them will get into a room and actually be able to sell it to someone. And that's still a human thing.
Right.
So that's the invitation. That's the invitation. And I think hiding behind the technology at some point is going to be ubiquitous to everyone. So imagine a world where everyone is equally proficient at AI. At that stage, the differentiator will still be you as a human. Yeah. Right. So that's the invitation.
Okay. Yeah. So is this a subscription product, or you're just teaching a methodology?
It's both. Okay. So artificial general market intelligence is a methodology.
Right.
Forge is a product, and it's a service business.
Okay.
It takes into consideration the stuff that we learned through the process. And it's pretty much codifying all the knowledge that we've gathered in interacting with our clients, early stage adopters of AI tools, and fortunately the brands that have allowed us to work with them. Right. And so Forge itself, as a software as a service product that we're currently market testing, got 121 users at the moment, 98% return rate every week, and growing steadily. So it's a product that we're going to take to market. It's going to be a standalone creative technology business, which is great, because it helps me to solve for the very thing that I did not like about the agency model, right? Yeah. Time and materials.
Absolutely.
So this breaks us away from that. And then secondly, we've got a team that work inside our business that are trained on AI tools, and they can take on briefs and execute them at lightning speed.
Right.
And that's really, really exciting because we're seeing how that interacts with the traditional model, and when does it become a human thing? When is it an AI thing?
Really quickly on that, you made a comment earlier saying most agencies feel like this level of output is cheating.
Yes.
Walk me through your thoughts on that, and how do you position it? If I quote you and say the job is going to take me 7 days, and I go on to Forge and within 3 minutes it's done.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So I'll tell you where the statement came from.
Right.
Right. We do what we call AI sprints, right? Which is taking those 4 steps, applying the methodology, and getting to a point super quickly. And we became quite good at it. Right. Okay. Our process was at 42 days once upon a time. We managed to do this now in hours, right? Provided I have everyone in the room and I can orchestrate correctly. So we did this exercise with a new creative that came into our business, new traditional creative. Great at what he does, but traditional creative. And so we put him through an AI sprint, and the thing that came out of his mouth at the end of it was that I feel like I've just cheated.
Yeah, okay.
That's when I realized the extent to which a creative person attaches value to the pain of the process. When someone says, I need to labor through this, I need to begazela with this brief, right? It's that concept of
I need to suffer.
Yeah, I need to suffer for the output or the outcome to be worth it, right? The penny dropped for me at that point, because if they attach so much value to the suffering, and the suffering then validates the output, and you give them a process where you do it a lot quicker,
the suffering
it almost invalidates them.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
And that's a deeply emotional thing for someone who's a true creative, to feel invalidated by the technology.
Right.
Now that shows up in many different ways. It shows up with people, just skirting around, using it and, using it lightly here and there and not fully immersing themselves. But it's a symptom of them still not understanding that even though it allows you to speed up the process, the value of your input, your experience, your going, I once did this and it felt like this.
Right.
That is still the magic dust that we need, right? So I think a lot of people aren't yet at that point where they fully appreciate that.
Right.
But they'll get there. It's the learning curve of technology.
Right.
And I similarly, when I started, tinkering with this kind of thing, I didn't realize the importance of my magic dust until I got really quick outcomes very quickly. And then I could go, if I just add one or two things, this elevates this completely, changes the game completely. But you and I could get the same output and treat it very differently. So I now have a very different appreciation of how I have to language and nuance how this tool can work and help.
Right.
And so for our creatives, we position it as a brainstorming tool, right? So we say, it'll give you 25, 30, 40, 50, whatever big ideas, but your ability to look at 25 big ideas and go, that one, and that one. That's what we need you for.
Okay.
And then to synergize that and go, I know the client's temperament is X, therefore the way we land this is Y.
Right.
That we still need you for, right? And for you to be spending time obsessing with that is far better than you be spending hours trying to think about big ideas.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's really the nuance. Yeah.
Now, is there a moral dilemma when I get the output in a super efficient manner and I still charge the same as when I used to get the output in a traditional manner?
Yeah. So no, I don't think there is one.
Right.
I understand where it comes from. I understand that if you have always been used to the labor of love, you attach a certain sweat capital to that process, right? Incorrectly so, in my view. Right? There's that age-old story about the person who designed the Nike logo, and it was them sitting down and doing some scamps, and in a quick second they got to the output.
Right.
They handed it over, and the person looked at it and says, "Oh, you did that in 3 seconds. Then it's obviously not that expensive." The answer was, no, it's extremely expensive because you can't account for the years of experience that it took me to articulate this logo.
Of course.
Right? That's what you're paying for.
Of course.
So we've made the bad mistake of making it about time and materials.
Okay.
Because the opposite is also true. And this is why there's a lot of abuse in the creative industry.
Right.
Is that I will give you a time and material quote.
Yes.
And it actually takes me double the time to do it. But you never come back and recover those hours.
Those hours anyway.
Now, is that a moral dilemma?
I hear you.
The answer is yes, it is. Okay. Because you should go back and say, I thought it was going to take me 3 hours, Mrs. Client, but it actually took me 16 hours. Can you pay me for the balance of the 15 hours? What is the client going to say to you?
No.
Get out of town.
Right.
So the reciprocal, you can't have your cake and eat it. So if I can give you the output and you believe it's a quality output in half the amount of time, then you should be paying for the value of the output. And that's how it should have been from the beginning. For us to have a palatable way to be able to measure creative output. And it's just not that way. It's the same challenge that our friends in consulting will face. In terms of the fundamental unit economics of creative and knowledge businesses. But no, I don't think it's morally wrong to charge someone an output-based rate based on the quality of what you produce.
Is it fair to say that what you've defined as magic dust is the art of prompting?
It's a combination of the art of prompting and the human ingenuity that you bring into it.
Okay.
I would probably separate it. So prompting is a very practical skill.
Right.
It's like drawing, right? So we can both draw. One can draw better than the other. The reason you can draw better than me is maybe you studied drawing. Prompting is the same. We can both construct a prompt and give it to ChatGPT. You could prompt better. Why? Because you're an English major, right? And you understand how to explain the feelings that you're going through right now emotionally. And I'm just going to say I'm sad. You get what I'm saying?
I'm tired.
Yeah, I'm tired.
Yes.
Right? But you can say, the way the mood is making me feel is profoundly somber, right? It's a very different approach. So we can all prompt. It's just going to be those who prompt better.
Okay.
The magic dust is when the output comes out, the knowledge and the experience to know whether this is good, bad, and what you can do to elevate it. That's the magic dust.
Okay.
And that's slightly different because someone else could prompt something and I could read it and I could still apply the magic dust. So I think of them as separate, but you could put them together if you're trying to think about being a more holistic, in inverted commas, professional.
Got you. Is Forge an AI agent?
No, it's not. So it started that way. It started with tinkering with a few different AI agents, and then we take the view of an abstract platform. So we've been able to abstract a layer that is the the process layer, and we integrate from an enterprise perspective into the best-in-class AI that exists. So we built plumbing into the best-in-class AI.
Okay.
So our job was to create the most user-friendly experience from a creation process point of view and integrate intelligence into it, and then set up the plumbing from an architecture point of view to be able to integrate whatever AI of the day is important.
Are these like Zapier workflows and that sort of stuff?
No, so it's only one workflow.
Okay.
It's only one workflow, and that workflow is based on what we've assessed over the briefs we've done over the past 10 years.
Okay.
So it's one workflow. But on the workflow, each of those stages has got specific ways that we articulate how people interact with the platform. Okay. As an example, when you scope documents, when you've got a brief and you're scoping something, we've developed what we call a conversational scoping interface, which is our proprietary technology.
Okay.
It's pretty much allowing the AI to understand what you're trying to do and ask you questions to be able to generate a budget, generate a timeline, generate a project plan. So that's bespoke to scoping. When we've got the brief module, which is a feature, we've developed a scoring feature that allows you to know that this is a crap brief or a great brief. We look at the strategy as a module, and we developed tools for you to be able to develop great strategy in an integrated way.
Yeah.
So each part of the workflow in itself is a module and a feature on the platform.
Gotcha.
For you to be able to use as a standard.
Is it a combination of multiple LLMs, or have you gone for a single one?
Correct. It's the combination of multiple LLMs,
Okay.
and we are building our LLM off the back of that, right?
Okay.
So the goal is to build Africa's most contextually aware marketing LLM.
Okay.
When we started experimenting, as you know, like every output that had to do with Africa had Ubuntu somewhere. Of course. Because at that point, very little information had been used to train the LLMs. Now you don't have the same issue, fortunately, but still you can tell that sometimes it doesn't fully understand the context of the output, especially when it comes to the creative brainstorming.
Right.
So the outputs can be very, what's the right word? Nuanced from a European point of view.
Yes.
Simply because the LLM still, if you think about where they sit in the kind of learning and training that's happening.
The training data is not
Eurocentric. So that's the opportunity. Strive Masio has now made the investment, so hopefully we can now get LLMs that are trained on African context, African understanding, and the nuance to be able to get better African outputs.
Is it worth us sort of positionally tackling the building of our own LLMs?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Those knowledge bases are going to be what help us to get better levels of creativity. Let's look at language as an example.
Right.
There's a platform called reshape AI that's trying to take indigenous languages and create a way that you can plug into their LLM and help you to understand indigenous languages.
Okay.
Now, there's multiple applications for that, right? If you think about from a call center right through to advertising. But when we develop, adverts conceptually, we're thinking in English.
Of course.
We're not thinking in Swahili. We're not thinking in Tswana. We're thinking in English. And so then you've got an output that must be a poster, a social media campaign that has to be then at some point Google translated into the local language.
Yeah.
What happens if you could think originally in the language that it is intended and designed to? We don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Because we don't do that right now. So there's lots of opportunities that we don't even know the output thereof right now, that people are building individual components around LLMs to be able to help solve for that.
Okay.
And that's also why we've gone for the strategy that we have from an architecture point of view. We're not trying to build another big ChatGPT. We're not trying to compete with those guys have got a lot of money. They're going to do that very well.
Absolutely.
We're trying to own the process of creation, and we're trying to ensure whatever best-in-class AI supports that is integrated into that process.
Into a niche.
Correct.
Your thoughts on open versus closed models? Is Forge going to be an open source model or a closed model?
So I'm a big fan of open.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of open. Theoretically,
I'm paying.
I know that right now that the conversations we're having with the big corporates, as because of the phase of technology we're in, is they're all worried about open. They're all worried about where's my data, who's going to play with it.
Right.
And I get it. It's part of what we need to secure. So the philosophy of the platform is that we allow you to do both. If you're going to have an instance of Forge and you are a highly secure bank, there's an instance we can develop that allows us to solve for your security reality.
Okay.
But
is that a white label or a fork?
It's a white label.
It's a white label. Okay.
But there's pros and cons, and this is what I keep saying to them. It's like if you're going to give someone a lake to fish from versus the ocean to fish from. You can't catch a shark in a lake. From a creative concept point of view.
Yeah.
What you can do is you can contain it, and that's what they're looking for right now. They're looking for a way to go back and give guarantees around risk and compliance, which I get. I fully understand.
For sure.
But I think it'll come full circle. I think there'll be a point at which there'll be a balance between, the openness of the LLMs that you can access and your own data. And as technology advances, there'll be a way that those two worlds can meet and you can get the benefit of both.
Yeah.
I believe that, the more open you are, the more you can innovate fundamentally. That's what I was saying from a philosophy perspective, open. But I fully appreciate that there's risks that come with that. And when you see the kind of discussion and discourse happening, even at the highest level with the Sam Altmans and the Ilias of the world, the conversation boils down to a philosophy around open or closed, innovate or constrain. That's really what it is. So I'm all about innovate. I'm not a constrainer.
Of course.
Because also my context is Africa. My context is knowing the problems that we have.
We have. Speaking on that, I have this feeling when I first started tracking AI, my own productivity, how I integrate into the business, et cetera, I felt like I almost had a hold on it.
Yeah.
I feel like we've all lost that. There's just so much happening and the exponential rate is prompting me to ask, at what point do we panic?
Yeah.
When do we freak out about this thing?
Yeah. It's a good question. And I wish I knew the answer, but I think there'll be lead indicators on when we should freak out. The less control we have of the output is a lead indicator when we should start freaking out.
Okay.
And I say that respectfully. Utility will tend to trump everything.
Right.
So if you're going to see value in being able to click the checkbox and the app you've downloaded can give you what you need, you're going to click the checkbox and not read the terms and conditions. But if you do that and the solution you get is starting to make decisions that you don't have control over, that's when you start freaking out.
Yes.
For me, that's one lead indicator. The second is, I think there's a maturity that needs to happen as far as the conversation and discourse with governments and compliance institutions. We saw with crypto and what happened with crypto, and the inability of the Reserve Bank to actually wrap their heads around what was going on. And their point of view was actually just restrict and close. And that has got a direct consequence on how your entire monetary system can either benefit or miss out on the opportunity. And so when governments and when the regulators are not participating at the correct levels, and you're outsourcing that discussion to global powers, that's also another freak out moment.
Absolutely.
Because what that means is that the rules of the game are being set elsewhere, and you have no control or visibility on what is happening. That's a big freak out moment. Africa and our legacy and our history knows exactly what that means.
Of course.
You come from the Congo, you know what's happening with minerals over there.
Absolutely.
And the expropriation, it's because there was a conversation happening and we were just not part of it. That's a freak out moment for me. Secondly, I think the other thing is, and we see it all the time, when as organizations, the rate at which we find ourselves moving is completely incongruent with the rate at which the world is moving.
Right.
It's a simple and it's a very overused phrase, but if that rate is out of sync, you need to be really, really scared.
Right.
Banks should be freaking out. That's why that's why the fintechs exploded.
Yes.
Because they were not moving as fast as the world around them were moving. When I was in the banking sector, I was seeing a lot of opportunities and I was asking questions. And my questions were actually seen as a bit of an irritation.
Right.
And South Africa's economic system is such that the banks can actually just shake hands and agree to play nice. But nowadays, you're seeing new entrants, you're seeing people that are coming in with offering just slithers of value, but they're actually capturing a lot of, that's when you should be freaking out, right? And so I think there'll be those lead indicators that you need to be awake to. And if you're seeing them, you'll either be able to spot the opportunity or you'll be able to raise the alarm bell sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Do you think crypto is the money system that's built on top of the AI layer?
it's the most natural money system that's built on top of the AI layer for a number of reasons. Interoperability,
Yes.
Scalability, your ability to deploy at the same rate of innovation. There's no other monetary system that could do that. So I think it's the most natural option. I don't see how you'd be able to take a traditional feudal system and use it on top of an AI-enabled environment. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
But primarily Web3 would be the application that you'd be able to use from an AI point of view.
Yeah.
Web3 is what's created, the ability for the internet to grow up and do the things it wish it could do. But crypto integrates into that.
Yeah.
So I don't see that as incongruent.
Yeah.
And I don't see any other real options.
Are you optimistic about crypto or?
Yeah, I think the hype has obviously died, one would say, but it's not going anywhere, right? So for me, it's less about being optimistic versus having made peace. And the broad scale application of crypto is what is going to happen next. So like electric cars, there was a long period of time where it was, a theory in someone's backyard. A lot of things had to shift economically, a lot of things had to shift politically, a lot of things had to get out of the way for that to become real. And we're seeing it becoming real now. Crypto is going to be in exactly the same context. There's a lot of things that have to shift for it to land. And one of those things is mainstream adoption, right? How do you make it that accessible to everybody so that it's not, one of those platforms that is fundamentally exclusive? So I think it's a matter of time. I don't think it's going anywhere. I don't think it's one of those things that we're going to wake up tomorrow like, what are these things called? On the highways that they had to take down.
Or the gantries.
It's not those gantries that are going to go away. It's going to be there for a while.
Right. And then when you're thinking about the advent of robotics, and now the next level of AI is you have AI in a human form.
Yes.
That's another panic moment.
Yes.
What does it do to us? We're like, our digital divide is so vast.
Yeah.
That's a cause for concern for most people.
Yeah. The other day I was doing the dishes with my wife.
Well done, bro.
And no, I do it all the time. I do it all the time. But she always mentions to me, she goes, I just wish someone would hurry up and invent the assistance, the home assistant that's going to allow me not to have to do this kind of thing.
Yes.
She likes a clean house. She likes to make sure the house is clean every single day. And, when you've got a human nanny, there's always going to be the issue of not cleaning up to my standard. They're getting tired. They need to sleep. So my wife was saying to me, when is someone just going to invent a nanny that can just work and keep my house clean? And I said to her, it's not that far off. It's just a matter of making it commercially viable for you to have a humanoid robot. Yeah. But I said to her, then what happens next, right? So you've got this robot in the house. It is observing your patterns. It is potentially listening to your conversations. It is understanding a lot about this family. Are you comfortable with that? Right? Are you comfortable with that information, whether knowingly or unknowingly being collected? Because remember, it's about utility. Yeah. So the more this thing knows about you, the more it actually can make your life better. Yeah. So if it knows you arrive,
because that's the trade-off.
That's the trade-off, right? So I said to her, how much are you willing to give away to get the value of what you're asking for? And obviously, it's nice and easy to say, now, of course, yes, it must know when I come home and when to come and get the bags from the key. Of course. But then when does that become a problem? And where's that data actually going? Yes. And who's doing what with that data? And that's where the governance piece is important. So it's all good and well. And I say this respectfully because I'm an optimist. It's all good and well to find the value of what technology can do. But the responsible, ethical conversation that runs alongside it is as important. And my big worry, especially in the Africa context, is we don't have enough thinkers who fully can understand it without shutting it down. Right. It's a healthy exploration of the unknown. Yeah. And to the extent that we don't know, our mindset should be open to learn. And my big worry is that I don't see many leaders that have that. The knee-jerk reaction, like mine when I wrote the social media policy at Nedbank, was no one must access social media, right? And it's just not practical. Yeah. So that healthy appetite and skill to explore the unknown is what I think is going to be quite important for executives and leaders.
How do we build that table where, one, we are And I liken it to, you wrote an article about the Berlin conference.
Yes.
And how, Africa was divvied up. I think in my view, I think this is another moment.
Yeah.
In AI is doing that at the moment.
Absolutely.
And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, you would know who wrote the rules.
Absolutely.
Where the economic prosperity is going.
Yeah.
And et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
How do you, in your view at least, how do you build that table with the leaders who are willing to show up and listen?
Look, I mean, some will argue that ship has sailed. I mean, we saw what happened after DeepSeek released their model, and the reaction from the US, Elon Musk, and the AI mafia.
Right.
They held a press conference and they announced that they're going to be investing gazillions of US dollars.
500 billion.
To keep the competitive advantage in the US, right? And so to a certain extent, the ship has sailed, but I think the green shoot is, and I mentioned it flippantly, the green shoot is looking at someone like a Strive, who has now publicly announced that he's going to be developing AI infrastructure on the continent for the continent. It is really important that we get behind entrepreneurs that are thinking that way.
Right.
And although they're early stage, and although a lot of people may not understand it, it's almost incumbent on us to blindly support it, right? And to the extent where I say blindly support it, is that if we do not assist those entrepreneurs that are from the continent, that are taking those risks, the rules that are being written elsewhere will engulf us. And so if we have an opportunity to get behind one of our own, I think it's a very practical thing to do.
Yeah.
If I was to give a clarion call to corporate South Africa, to look at all the services that they currently have outsourced to Microsoft, Google, etc. Go and engage with Strive and what he's trying to do to ensure that we support him. And then what you'll see is that there'll be many more Strives. In the word entrepreneurs is called front runner in French, right? Because you the first. So you get behind the first, and then many more will emerge. And I think that's what we have to do.
Right.
That's what our hope is, especially with when we think about ourselves as a front runner with AI and marketing. Our hope is that people will see what we're trying to do and get behind it. And the more they get behind it, the easier we can write our own rules. And if not, we'll take rules from elsewhere.
Yeah.
And it'll be another Berlin, another 1886.
Exactly.
Which will be unfortunate.
And we can't undo that.
Yeah.
When you think about another business you own, like Bridge Labs, are you thinking that kids should still be getting a computer science degree? What are you seeing from an AI coding, programming point of view?
Yeah, I look. I mean, obviously it's shifted. So the hard work of coding now, you can get AI to code for you. So to a certain extent, engineering is not immune to AI.
Right.
But it goes back to the point I made. If you're a skilled workman, you'll use the tool accurately. So I think the fundamentals that coding teaches you around problem solving are so important.
Yeah.
Right? And the sheer grit to work through a problem, working through 300 lines of code to find that bug, because you have to fix it.
Yes.
There's a certain level of grit that teaches you, which is important. To get given a challenge that has never been, in inverted commas, done before.
Right.
And what your mind has to be able to do to be able to achieve that is something that you can't teach easily. So I think the skill and the discipline of coding and the understanding of software engineering is still important.
Yeah.
Because while we speak about the cutting edge stuff, there's still other industries that are laggard industries that still require people to be competent and be able to serve them. So I still advocate for it. With our team in Bridge Labs, we are very blessed to have some really phenomenal young African engineers working on really, really great projects that you can tell that they've got an intuitive understanding of technology and they've got a great understanding of the problem, how quickly you can unlock value. And so for young people who are thinking about that still, whether it's an opportunity or not, it's absolutely still an opportunity.
Oh, well.
What the great thing is now is that where previously you might have had to sit down and write 600,000 lines of code. Now you don't have to. You can find ways to be able to interact with AI to build certain components of your technology so that you don't have to code everything.
Right.
You still need to know what you're asking. You
Yes.
still need to know how to direct, instruct, and review. But it's certainly something that's still worth doing.
Still need to know the why.
Absolutely.
Before I let you go, two more things.
Yeah.
Do you think there's an actual physical singularity that happens?
I can't imagine that there wouldn't be. I can't imagine there wouldn't be. So at some point, the interface between us and technology is going to get thinner and become non-existent.
Right.
What that means to me is at some point, the value and the utility of having technology closer to you physically and physiologically will just make far more sense than not, right? So if I think about what we already see happening with Google Glasses, what we already see happening with how our phones now also allow us to swipe our cards, what we see happening with the stories of being able to put a chip, RFID chip in your skin, and so those are all early signals that at some point it'll make absolute sense. But the questions around the conditions that make it safe for humanity are what we have to obsess about. So the issue around where does the data go? Who is actually looking at the data that you're now scanning because your diabetes monitor is now in your chest? That's the question.
Right.
So singularity for me, when we can't distinguish whether you're this human or this is a technology, I think it's par for the course. It's going to happen. The question is, who's going to write the rules for when it happens? What should be the playing ground? How should it work? And I really don't know. I don't know whether that becomes a central body. I don't know whether that becomes, sovereign states that have an agreement around how this kind of thing works. I'm not sure. If we borrow from history, what's typically always happened is that you have, some level of sovereignty in the beginning, and then you've got an investment that leads powers to become superpowers, and they then start dictating the rules.
Right.
That's what history tells us.
Right.
Will that repeat itself? Potentially. That also could give an indication as to why geopolitics are what they are today.
Correct.
So I think the singularity moment is inevitable. I really do think it's inevitable. I think if I go back to the argument for utility, if you had a grandparent diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and you could put something in their body that could allow them to live for longer,
why would
you say yes or no?
Right. Right.
That's what I'm saying. If you had someone that's got a brain tumor, and you could put something in their brain that allows them to be fully functional, would you say yes or no? You get what I mean? So,
yes.
so I think it's inevitable. The rules that are going to be written that govern it is what's going to be the difference.
Yeah. And I think those will be the pivotal moments when they can solve really difficult questions.
Yeah.
And it's no longer just a matter of, do I feel comfortable? It really is about life and death.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I guess you're getting one for sure.
Look, I mean, if you think about the number of life-threatening diseases and the acceleration of some of these manageable and or avoidable human ills that we find ourselves with in this era and this century, I cannot imagine that people would turn away from the opportunity to have the opportunity to elongate, preserve life. I think there'll almost be a splitting. There'll be a separation in terms of philosophical beliefs, like with religion, like with politics. There'll be those that believe that it's the right thing to do and those that don't. And that's not a bad thing either.
Absolutely.
But I do think the choice, and if you do choose that it is the right thing to do, that the governance of the choice is important. Like all things, right? If you choose to be a separatist or a leftist,
right,
the governance of that choice is what is important. The choice is up to you,
for sure,
but the governance is important.
Absolutely. I ask every guest on the show, what's the one idea you have that you haven't had the time to execute? Pay it forward.
What's the one idea I haven't had the time to execute? It was called Library Andy.
Okay.
I collect a lot of books.
Okay.
And I wish there was a service, and maybe one exists. I wanted to create a service that I could send my books for storage, but I could access them anytime I wanted to. And I could also make money from people accessing my books. So 2 things to solve for. I don't need to create space anymore in my house to have lots and lots of shelves of books.
Okay.
When I move around and I'm living in different places, I can still access my library.
Physically?
Both physically and digitally. Lastly, I think like any store of value, I think knowledge in books should have a value. Like people who collect paintings, libraries should have an actual monetary value. So if I could have a way that I could do that and make some money from it, I'd love to do that.
Oh, interesting. And this is not a Amazon Kindle thing?
No, it's my library.
Okay.
Yeah, it's my library. So I will curate books that I like to read. I'd love to be able to have access to your library of books. Right. We see people publishing them all the time now. This is the list of books I'm reading.
Yeah.
But if someone could access, Ted's full library of books, and they could pay to do that somehow, digitally or otherwise. And if they want to access your transcripts where you've written notes in your library, there's a premium service. But you collect it and you drop it off and you get it back in a bit of time. So something in those along.
What made you want to write books, by the way? You've written 2?
Yeah, my son and my father.
Okay.
So my father's an academic and he's experienced so much in his life. I wish he had written books. He's had such a rich life. He's been a race car driver. He was a playwright. He's played sport. He's done a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I think, the dynamics of African fathers is something that you should discuss on your podcast and how it works out, right? I wish I could have known a lot more about him.
Okay.
So there's a period where I went, maybe it's not natural all the time to sit down and ask your dad to tell you about the good old days where he was getting drunk and being young and ratchet.
Right.
But I wish I could find a source to actually read about that.
Right.
Secondly, my son was being born. I was working for Facebook at the time, and I was traveling a hell of a lot. And then I saw an opportunity to write a book because I thought to myself, I would hate for my son to be asking the same question about me. So my first book was actually that, and it was just articulating the experiences up until that point, and just taking a moment to pause and reflect, and hopefully pay forward some of the things I'd learned. And then my second book, which I wrote about a year ago, was on the experience in investing back into a creative agency and the philosophy around what I'm trying to build now going forward. And that was more from a, kind of helping people to scale the vision and understand what we're trying to do. It's called the Brave Code.
Yes.
And a lot of the principles in the book are what we try to do in the business.
Right.
So it's helped a lot for those that are super interested in what we're trying to do. But it's also, I find writing quite a cathartic process. Okay. So I'm working on my thing.
I'm bringing them to the office just so you can sign them.
With pleasure. With pleasure.
And then tell us about your new book, Optimism in the Age of AI.
Yeah. So it's going to be, the positioning of the book is around everything that we've been speaking about.
Yeah.
It's about, the future, as we all refer to it as a distant thing. The future is actually an everyday thing. And so you could be a pessimist or you could be an optimist. And so I try and build a business case around where optimism has been the philosophy of organizations that have managed to survive many, many iterations of technology over time. So that's the heart of the book. I'll probably speak a little bit about artificial general marketing intelligence. Trying to find some really interesting case studies to include in the book. So there's some great companies that are doing some interesting things. Very early stage. Some of them are quite advanced, but they feel very shy to talk about them, especially in our context because of the issues around people and labor and the labor dynamics.
Yes.
So a lot of people are a little bit gun shy.
Okay.
So I'm trying to find great case studies to include in there, but just painting the picture that being optimistic in this age is actually there's an upside.
It's critical.
Yeah.
Musa, thank you. I think this has been a very enriching conversation.
Fantastic.
I started this podcast because I personally want to speak to and see more people that represent the best of us.
Excellent.
And I think you represent the best of us.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, brother. Time well spent.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And if you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Like, subscribe, share. This is the Winners Win podcast. It's a wrap.